So I'll get started. Hi, Jen. Nice to see you again. For our audience who may not know you, can I ask you to introduce yourself and briefly talk about your campaign?
Yeah, so I'm Jennifer. I'm 26 and I'm an activist, an environmental activist, and I've recently been supporting the Just Stop Oil campaign. And the reason I've been supporting this campaign in particular is because it has a very clear and very necessary demand, and that is simply that the government do not allow any new oil and other fossil fuel developments. And the reason we're mobilizing behind this demand is simply because this is what the science tells us we absolutely must do. We have as much oil that we need already in the UK to support a just transition and a fair transition. And any new oil completely compromises that equality in our transition. It compromises the ability for us to have a safe future. The International Energy Agency and the IPCC have both said that there cannot be new oil developments if we're to stay within the 1.5 degree temperature rise limit. So this is just a clear demand that all expert scientists would agree we absolutely need if we're to secure a safe future. And even 1.5 itself has been called a death sentence by activists in the global south. So we're really not asking for much when we ask for the government to stick to a 1.5 degree temperature rise and to not go above that. So that's why we're mobilizing behind that demand.
Okay, no, that's really interesting. And obviously, we've seen at Rising Clyde, we've seen a number of developments with Just Stop Oil in Scotland. And the major one in the last week has been the New Star oil field in Clydebank, which was seen as a highly successful campaign for the group, with over 30 arrests reported and widespread destruction at the site for a number of hours. Is this the type of thing that the group will be focusing their efforts on going forward? And can we expect even more action north of the border than we've seen thus far, with most of the action being in England?
Yeah, so that is exactly the type of action we want to focus on as a group, because we want to disrupt people as little as possible. Like, we don't actively want to disrupt people or make people's lives harder. Like, we're very much actively against that. But what we do need to do is cause enough disruption that the government or the companies responsible for the crisis that we're in actually listen and they actually change and they do something. And so that's why we're targeting the oil industry itself, because we need to cause disruption somewhere to have any meaningful impact. And it just makes sense that we target the industry that is responsible for the crisis that we're in. Oil is destroying so much of the planet. Oil, it kills people. When we have air pollution that is killing millions of people every year because we burn oil, we see oil spills that decimate the environment. And last year the ocean was on fire because we're still trying to dig up oil. It does have to stop at some point. We're seeing the destruction of the planet as a result. And so that's why we're targeting the oil industry. And yeah, we managed to get enough people in Scotland to do this, to pull off a really successful campaign. We had the longest occupation of an oil site in UK history at around 60 hours, and that was great. And that has definitely incentivized us to continue this kind of thing in north of the border. So I'm not sure when, but there will definitely be more actions like this in Scotland at some point.
Excellent. No, that's good to hear. And you mentioned that you're wanting to avoid as much as possible disruption to the sort of general public. This seems to be a slight derivation in tactics from Just Stop Oil compared to, say, for example, the Extinction Rebellion, where campaigners are disrupting oil tankers on Britain's roads, yet also consciously trying not to disrupt other traffic. So would it be fair to identify this as a shift in tactics to try and get the public at large more on side, as this has been a major bugbear for public opinion and a sort of hindrance to the general public really getting on side with the campaigns in the past?
Yeah, I would say it is a shift in tactics because, yeah, of course, Extinction Rebellion and other groups like Insulate Britain, they have done great things. Like, when I first saw Extinction Rebellion, that's what inspired me to take action in the first place. That's what made me realize that as an individual, it's not completely hopeless, and that if I team up with other individuals, we can actually do something. We can have a huge effect. We can, be in the media and make the climate crisis like grab media attention as it should be doing every day. So these actions have had a place and they've been great, but by targeting the general public, the thing is the general public themselves don't necessarily have that much power. There's only so much we can do by, say, changing our own behaviors or voting a certain party. And so we need to start targeting the people that are responsible and people that are in power. And I think by targeting the oil industry itself, as opposed to the general public, that's just a much more effective tactic. And yeah, of course, if you can get general support, or more general support than perhaps other groups do, then that can only help as well.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned that you're wanting to take aim at the people in power, and get them to sit up and listen. It's not often that the Conservatives and Labour are in lockstep with each other on any issue, really. But they seem to be sort of lockstep against the Just Stop Oil movement. We've seen in recent days the Queen's speech, where the public order bill has been resurrected, having failed the first hurdle to get through the House of Lords. A second iteration has now been proposed. What do you make of this recent development, and are you worried that even if it doesn't quite get, through Parliament, that it may lead to a change in police tactics that have been seen thus far against your group? And how do you feel that would differ in terms of Scottish legislation that's been in place? Because obviously Just Stop Oil operate on both sides of the border, so are subject to the laws on either side.
Yeah, so it is worrying to see these steps taken by the government. And up in Scotland, it's been less of a worry because it's not this new legislation such as the PCSC bill and the new amendments that the government are trying to push through. That's not actually going to affect Scotland. So to a degree, it's not as much of a worry. But of course, like a lot of us in Scotland, the activists here, we work with in England or work with English activists. So there's still a worry for like all of our safety as a whole with these new measures that are being tried to put in place. And yeah, I think north of the border, this bill might not be relevant, but I've seen myself that the police are taking far more drastic measures than they have in the past. For example, I was arrested earlier this week just for stewarding at peaceful protest in Glasgow. And as far as I'm aware, no one has been arrested for something like that in the past. People are generally allowed to go out and peacefully protest. So the fact that the police have suddenly arrested someone for this is quite concerning, that even in Scotland, the police are cracking down on people, but just in less public ways, because they did it at my house instead of at the protest, so the media and the general public wouldn't see it. So yeah, I am worried about what's happening with crackdown from police and the government on protest, and it is a concern that it might put people off taking necessary action. But at the same time, I do have a glimmer of hope in that it's a sign that we're winning. It's a sign, like the fact that they feel the need to crack down is a sign that they're scared that we're actually going to have a meaningful impact and that they're actually going to have to change things themselves instead of just maintaining the status quo, which is obviously the more comfortable and more appealing option for them when you've got government taking massive donors from the industries that are, killing the planet. So it's a concern, but it can also be seen as a sign that we're winning. And I know myself and my friends in activism, we're not going to stop. It doesn't matter what they do. Like we're not really scared when the alternative is not having a future.
Okay, so you mentioned the media coverage that's been taking place in terms of Just Stop Oil. So I've seen numerous articles. We ourselves at Rising Clyde, we've obviously published numerous articles on Just Stop Oil and your activities. How do you feel that the media at large have done in terms of engaging with the Just Stop Oil group, in terms of covering the protests that have been obviously around the country? It's big news. Do you feel that the media have done enough at large in terms of engaging with the movement? Obviously, present publication excluded.
Yeah, I think that the media that we've gotten, especially for the last Scottish action, was great because, you know, one of my friends who also is in the Just Stop Oil movement, she was saying that like her friends and family have suddenly like they're starting to get it because they're actually seeing it in the media. And I don't think we had such a big impact in the UK, either due to the timings of the actions or just because there's, you know, a bit more competition UK wide rather than just in Scotland in terms of what gets in the media. So I think we've, you know, done a good job here in Scotland. But, you know, generally speaking, when it comes to whether the media is doing enough, it's definitely not. Like, we're facing the potential collapse of human civilization. We're facing a world that is not survivable. You know, like this is the potential extinction of humanity. It's the extinction of thousands, if not millions and billions of other species on the planet. You know, the situation that we are in, it's really, really bad. And the fact that the media isn't reporting on this is front page news every single day is feeding into this sense of climate denial where people can pretend that it's not as bad as it is. But if we don't act in a very, very short time frame, then we risk losing absolutely everything that we love. And lots of us that support the Just Stop Oil movement have come to terms with this, have accepted this reality, despite this not being in the media. But because it's not in the media, most of the general public, they're unable to do so. And it's why we're not taking action that should have happened decades ago. Like this was our parents' or our grandparents' problem to fix. It shouldn't be up to the youth to save our own futures at this point. But because the media is underreporting this and is acting like, you know, Hollywood celebrity gossip is more important than the end of human civilization, people aren't acting. And yeah, it's the media needs to change if we're to have any hope in actually achieving a livable future.
Oh, that's great. So I just had one final question. So if the government were to acquiesce to the demands of Just Stop Oil, what alternative energy do you think that we could use? Do you think that the infrastructure is in place to see the transition? You talked about there being enough oil for there to be a not peaceful, but a smooth transition from oil to and other fossil fuels to a greener set of energy. What alternatives do you think could be put in place? And do you think the infrastructure should be there in a timely enough fashion for there to be a smooth transition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm an environmental scientist and I'm by no means an expert myself. Like even as an environmental scientist, it's impossible to know like every single solution to every single problem that we face in terms of transitioning away from fossil fuels. But, you know, in the scientific community, we hear time and time again, we have all the solutions. We just lack the political will to put them in place. And I know like the vast majority of the oil we use can very easily be, you know, removed from the systems we live in by very simple changes, such as transitioning to renewable energy, so wind and solar, you know, the kind of obvious things like that, but also by reducing our demand, which we could massively do by other simple measures such as insulating British houses, because, for example, here in the UK, we have the leakiest houses in Europe. So in the winter, because we have no insulation, all the heating is just escaping our homes and we're having to use more energy to stay warm. So insulating British houses, very simple measure to reduce energy demand. Free public transport, again, get people out of their cars and get people into the more, you know, eco-friendly options. Like we just need simple changes that the government can very easily put in place. If the government can waste billions on failed, you know, COVID measures, then they can spend money on simple infrastructure changes to try to move us away from this, you know, archaic system where we're burning fossil fuels.
Okay, that's great. No, thank you so much for your time, Jen. And it's been great talking to you. Good luck with the rest of the campaign. And, you know, we'll be seeing more of you in Rising Clyde, hopefully,
Okay,
in the
great.
near future. That's great.